Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm Farrukh Fitafi. Viewers Sana Makbool, who is the regular anchor of this show, is traveling. So the moment she comes back, she will resume her duties. At this moment, I am hosting this show. Today, we are going to talk about one topic and one topic alone, and that is important because one by one, we have been seeing stories after stories about India's, let's call it alleged influence in other countries where they keep on hounding and killing their own expatriates. Particularly, we saw one episode in Canada where a Sikh dissident was killed, and the Canadian government actually took a stance on that. And after that, we heard something similar regarding what has been happening in UK as well. And after that, we have seen the FT report, Financial Times report, that says that the US also found out that there was an attempt at the life of one such dissident in America, on American soil. And that issue was, that attempt was foiled. And after that, that matter was, India was confronted with it, and India is still actually trying to find a way out of all this mess. We also saw in Qatar's case where a number of former Indian naval officials were handed out a death sentence because they were found spying for Israel. And after that, of course, today we have seen a development that the court has accepted, the Qatari court has accepted India's appeal. But so much so now that we have seen an intercept report as well, purportedly regarding Pakistani documents, which show that India has been killing Sikh dissidents or Sikh independent-minded people, and then also, Kashmiri nationalists as well within Pakistan. So these are very important questions. We have to actually talk about that. Our foreign ministry has actually raised this point internationally that India's these activities have been posing a threat to civilization, so to speak, and yet we haven't seen much changing on that front. India hasn't been confronted in the past 9 years. This went on for 9 years, and we have seen similar kind of poisonous propaganda coming from India as well. We saw that an influence campaign was foiled by EU's investigation unit, and despite that, the world doesn't seem to be paying any heed. We are going to talk about what this means, how this problem can be solved, and of course, since I mentioned this has been going on for past 9 years, why is it that the world is waking up to this reality just now when India's elections are fast approaching? In order to help us understand these issues in the studio, I'm joined by Raja Faisal, as always. Thank you very much, Raja sir, for being part of the program. Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmad also joins us, who is a noted expert on foreign affairs and also a member of Planning Commission. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. On Skype, we are joined by Ambassador Jauhar Saleem, who is former Foreign Secretary, Government of Pakistan. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program as well. With your permission, Dr. Saab, let me first go to Ambassador Jauhar Saleem and ask about his opinion regarding this issue. Ambassador Saab, why is it that the world is, all these revelations are taking place now when already so much damage has been done?
True that we have now multiple reports, like the current one that you've indicated from the US. Then earlier we had the case in Canada, then the Qatar, then in Pakistan, a serving naval officer from India. So this proclivity to use their diplomatic missions all around the world in key capitals and whatever other paraphernalia they have to basically carry out acts which are extraterritorial and illegal. For a long time, India has been getting away with that. That was because of India's stature in the world's political dispensation, so to speak. India's role or India's place within the so-called Asia pivot, within the Western calculus against China. Also because of India's growing economic prowess, an economy which is now exporting over $600 billion a year, getting over $100 billion or close to that of FDI a year, and which is now expected to join the ranks of the world's top 2 or 3 economies in terms of nominal GDP. In terms of purchasing power parity, it's perhaps already there. But what happened in Canada and the position the Canadian Prime Minister took and the Canadian administration took, and subsequently the position we see now the Americans are taking on the issue, shows a hardening of stance in the West. In some ways, we can call it an enough is enough policy. That, okay, fine, for a long time this has been ignored, but there's a limit to everything, and this cannot go on. I think it's that type of ambience which we see emerging. It's not yet there, but we are probably heading to a situation where all these excesses would not be overlooked anymore. Pakistan, of course, has been calling upon the world community, the international community, for a long, long time. With a great deal of evidence, we have presented dossiers to the United Nations, to friendly governments, to the US, many of the important countries. But what we had seen previously was that somehow those dossiers, which contained sufficient evidence, which contained evidence in terms of communications, evidence in terms of transcripts. I've seen some of those files, but somehow the world was not really taking attention. What was not paying attention, what was not taking cognizance of that. But I think now we have come to a point where there's a growing recognition and perhaps a growing proclivity, a greater receptivity.
Right.
And this augurs well for Pakistan, because Pakistan has been a victim of India's.
And Pakistan has been raising this issue for quite some time as well, but somehow it seems that gradually we have all grown weary of this. But you are right. If I were to surmise what you said, sir, Canada is the proverbial child that actually shouted out that emperor has no clothes. And now everybody is seeing that. Let me come to the studio and ask Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmad regarding what is happening right now. Sir, my own problem is all those dynamics that we kept on talking about regarding pivot to Asia and then containing China, all of those things are in their place. But despite that, so much seems to be changing very quickly, especially in an election year. Could this have anything to do with the fact that perhaps Indian intelligence agencies, which actually call shots here, are readying to dump Narendra Modi in the next elections?
Well, in my opinion, obviously, India's elections are less about domestic issues and more about foreign policy, and especially unlike Pakistan, where India does not fare anywhere in our election campaigns since the 1990s. Pakistan has always been a big factor, and you know the nationalistic hype is created, especially by the BJP, given their Hindu nationalist roots over Pakistan, and then it becomes a factor that secures a victory for the party. We have seen it in the previous 2 elections at least clearly, and I think the upcoming one might not be different. But you know, this phenomena that we are discussing today, Farrukh, I think there is a pattern to it, and the pattern does not begin this year. I have a list of Sikh leaders who have been killed or died mysteriously, first in UK, first in Canada, then in UK, which has not been reported that much, and one potential assassination that has been averted by the Americans, and 2 have been killed in Pakistan, in Lahore city, in the last 2 years. In May, last killing took place. So there is a pattern of a very well orchestrated transnational assassination program that the Modi government of Hindu nationalist, Hindu supremacist has been undertaking. The difference in this pattern, unlike the past, is that now the implications are visible in the Western world. That's the difference, and that is why this matter has suddenly become international.
Right.
So the implications we see in Doha, where the naval officers of the Indian Navy were caught and tried and then awarded punishments. The task was of raw in hands in glove with Mossad, trying to basically get the know-how of the stealth technology on the submarines, which the Qataris acquired from Italy. So eventually, the international espionage has been established in the case of a major Gulf country. In America, the FBI, after the assassination in June in Canada of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and all of these Sikh activists are basically have this attachment with the Khalistan movement. Khalistan movement in Indian East Punjab died down long time ago, but among the diaspora community, which is very strong and very rich also, in case of Canada, North America entirely, in the UK also. So it has revived itself, not necessarily in a militant fashion, because they can't do anything sitting across thousands of miles away, but they have been undertaking the past couple of years this momentum towards a referendum among the Sikh community as to how many majority does it support the creation of a separate state of Sikhs out of East Pakistan.
Which actually it doesn't fall under the rubric of terrorism, but freedom of expression.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Indian government, as it has been gripped by this Hindu nationalist wave, has been acting irresponsibly. This is a rogue state. It's a pariah state behavior, which doesn't know any bounds, which wants to act the way other imperial powers have been acting over time, in fact replicating the American model. The problem with Western imperialism is that they can do anything they want, but obviously this upstartish behavior on the part of India is objectionable. We have been raising this issue with regard to Kashmir, with regard to our own acts of terrorism, which are allegedly supported by outside powers, including of course India, in Balochistan, elsewhere. But the difference now is that when the pain is reached the Western world, that is why this outcry is there. And but far more important question that perhaps we can discuss later on is why is India behaving in this fashion now? What are the reasons? What abnormality has happened in a country where you had a bit of a secular tradition, there was a Congress party, other parties have also ruled. What has changed in India that has resulted in this kind of a completely rogue behavior internationally?
And that is essentially the takeover of Hindutva government in India, but that has been going on for 9.5 years. So something else might be changing. But I take this point that India is so keen on censoring voices of dissent that it would send people outside the country to kill dissidents. Faisal, you're open to asking questions later on as well if you want. But at this moment, let me ask you, because you have been interacting and knowing Indian side very well, especially Hindutva side. And at this moment, I mean, I understand that when the pain has reached the Western world, they might be reacting, but there seems to be some deliberate withdrawal of the cloak of invisibility that was hiding all these negative activities by India because nobody noticed it in 9 years. And there seems to be this fresh, earnest desire on India's part to leave its fingerprints behind. So there seems to be something that is cooking up. Is there possible that now that Narendra Modi is trying to become a turtle dove, at that time their heart state is ready to dump him, and that's why they're doing all this?
Farrukh, when I obviously when I look at the events and the timing of the events when it took place, I mean, I have to go back to 2014 speech, which was obviously given by Ajit Doval and Srivastava University, Shastra University. And in that Shastra University,
by the way, Indian Shastra University has withdrawn that video from its own YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I have the video, so I can post it anytime you like.
Yeah, and I think we should always be having as an evidence against India. And at that time, of course, there was a proper shift in their ideology, shift in their modus operandi, how they want to deal with their foes, as they considered them foes. Of course, about Pakistan, they said that defensive offense they'll be bringing in. They'll take the war to western front of Pakistan, and that's how they did. And of course, that was assassinations was part of it, of course, at that time. But if we talk about Khalistan movement, back in 2017-18, Khalistan movement actually came up with the referendum 2020 slogan. In that, of course, they wanted to have referendum 2020 held in Britain, in Canada, in Australia, elsewhere in the world, wherever the Sikh community, they were there. We know that during the COVID, of course, these sort of processions, they dried down a bit just because of COVID. But at the same time, behind the curtains, India was cooking all of this, and India actually executed that at that time.
But
and
all of this, they might have, but they haven't actually done it within this year.
Yeah.
But it is this year we are finding it out.
Yeah.
It was going on for 9 years.
Exactly, it is, and to some extent, I would agree with you that right now, of course, Indian establishment, the deep state of India, it has figured out that Modi's era has ended, and it's time to say goodbye to Modi and go towards somewhere else. Who's that? I mean, I have no idea, but obviously two names within BJP, they kept on knocking around.
Not BJP.
Yeah.
The idea is that now that they have actually given the medicine to the moderates, now it is time to recapture India's lost global cultural influence by reinstating something secular.
Exactly. And Farrukh, the important thing is, I mean, I know Ambassador Jauhar, he has rightly pointed out that West, of course, it had enough of it, and of course now West wants to speak around it because a country like Canada, it got hit by it. Why a country like Canada? We know that Sikh community is very powerful within Canada. I mean, they had
let us not call them powerful, let us call them influential.
Influential, I must say, because why I was saying powerful, because they have
members of cabinet.
defense minister. I mean, defense minister from
former defense.
Yeah, former defense minister. He was from within the party, and now one of the candidates running for premiership is from their community as well. And of course, a majority of them who are settled in Canada, they agree with the Khalistan movement ideology, and that is why the real threat they face from there. And they wanted to create a deterrence within Canada, and they have been successful in doing so. They have, of course, got one of the leaders, and rest of them, they are asked to secure themselves in a way that they are not going to, they have to reduce their activities and all. This is what is taking place because they know that India is with a mission doing it, and that mission is to, of course, eliminate all of these, activists who are working for freedom of Khalistan. And West now standing up against India, it is pivotal. And of course, in coming days, we will see that this menace, which we have been seeing since a long time, almost 9.5 years, that would end now and in future. Of course, we can see that political changes would take place within India as well.
Right. We are just going to actually wait and see whether that materializes or not. I've grown agnostic to whatever is happening in India, because there was a time when I used to care. Now it seems it never actually seems hopeful in India. But let me go back to Ambassador Jauhar Saleem. And Ambassador Saab, you are right about the fact that India has actually trespassed and done whatever it has done and offended Five Eyes. So naturally, there is going to be some intelligence backlash as well, similarly political as well. But right now, we have been living in a country where we have been lectured for past 20 years the importance of rule-based international order. Why is it that this rule-based international world order disappears when it comes to a country as influential as India? And if all these people who are being killed by Indian side, they want to have some justice, where should they go? India is not signatory to Hague, and of course, India does not actually support going to ICJ.
Yeah, it's a good point. First of all, yes, as I mentioned before, because of a country's influence and because of a particular position in the geostrategic equation of the West, there was a certain leeway, a certain allowance that was given. And despite pretty hard evidence that was provided by Pakistan over the years, India was able to avoid any Western, what to speak of sanctions, in fact, any condemnation, or even any Western overview of its actions. But there's a limit to everything. Now that India, in some ways, has crossed that limit, because as far as those actions were taking place in Pakistan, I think many countries were less concerned. And it was generally thought that, okay, India would carry on these actions in perhaps some neighboring countries, Pakistan, for instance, or Afghanistan, and other countries as well.
Nepal,
But
Sri Lanka.
yeah, Sri Lanka, of course, like you said, but not in hardcore Western countries, particularly important Western countries. But India passed that threshold. And in doing so, I think it has attracted that attention which it would have wanted to avoid. Now that has happened, there would be more censure of such actions if they're repeated. There would be more monitoring of such actions, or possible actions. And more importantly, I think the trust element, the credibility that India enjoyed, unfairly actually, unwarrantedly, I would say, I think that phase might be over. Of course, that does not mean that within the Western calculus, India would lose its preeminent position so far as the Western calculus against China is concerned, or the Asia pivot is concerned, or the organizations such as Quad or Five Eyes and other I2U2. Having stated that, India has to tread more cautiously in future from its perspective, and Pakistan would probably have more receptive ears in the Western capitals from now on. So far as the other point is concerned, as to where victims of such actions, such assassinations, where should they knock in terms of getting justice? So I think it will be probably okay. ICJ. Now this remains to be seen as to the question of jurisdiction is always there. But in Western countries, sometimes it's actually easier to seek justice within the national courts, as it has happened, for instance, in the case of 9/11. As we all know, many of the families of the victims, they sued the foreign governments even, but they sued the foreign governments in the American courts. And that became quite an issue for many countries. So that window is there, like the US courts, the Canadian courts, those national courts. I think that should be the first door for them
Right.
to knock.
Right, and that is a satisfying answer. Let me actually come back to the studio and let me ask Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmad. Dr. Sahab, we have seen, I understand that, domestic law is always deemed superior to international law. And that is why perhaps it is advisable that most of these victims or their families actually go to the domestic courts of those countries where this is happening. But there are cases when these people, the victims, might not be actually the nationals. And there is a complicated law there in every country, and it seems that it becomes at times difficult. Whenever we spoke about international law, we kept on hearing lawfare as an option. Could you actually qualify that bit as well? And why is it that our dossier making actually stops where Pakistan's boundaries end? We could have actually collated all the data and presented the true picture to the world.
Well, you see, when you take these issues of conflict or extreme behavior, which are practiced by states, to the international level, there are certain complications. And obviously, as a member of the international community, every country is expected to behave in a certain fashion. And there are domestic laws, there are international laws in order to regulate that behavior. What seems to be clear in India's case more recently is that its international behavior or even internal conduct is absolutely contradictory to civilization. Whether it is a sports match, you see a very abnormal kind of an attitude. Treatment of minorities is really violation of human rights every extent. We were talking about Indian minorities, Christians, Indian Muslims, and particularly our brothers and sisters in occupied Kashmir. So that behavior has been there for a long time. In fact, if you go back to trace the history of Hindu nationalism, it was the RSS, their mother organization of the BJP, that killed Mahatma Gandhi. And this BJP regime has revived this, like the killer of Gandhi has been presented as a hero. Then the first time they came to power only for a while, they destroyed the Babri Mosque and have committed through institutional support to build the Ram temple in its place. The next time they came to power, they tested the nuclear weapons and pushed the South Asian region into the nuclear phase. And this time when they have come to power for a very prolonged period of time, we have seen actually abrogation of the international UN Security Council resolutions over Kashmir, grabbing this entire territory and dividing it. And then actually changing the demographic reality. So the question, Farrukh, I ask again, is basically what is the root cause of this behavior? So one reason it seems to me is, like India has always been primitive. In fact, their dealing with the international civilized world has been limited as compared to the territory which became Pakistan in 1947. So we were under the British. We were previously Muslims rulers for 700-800 centuries. And our break with the American-led world never came post-Second World War. India has been, like entering in this civilized world only in the last 30 years or so. And what you see is a very kind of an upstartish behavior, having accumulated economic wealth over time, and behavior is visible accordingly now. So stories of international espionage, stories of this state-sponsored assassinations of Sikh and Kashmiri fighters. So this is the area scope is expanding. And the way the leadership behaves or the party behaves internally and externally is absolutely abnormal, uncivil behavior at all. So I wonder sometime as to does it have something to do with the racist roots of Hindutva, which is exactly the same as the Nazi philosophy was.
And casteism also becomes a racism.
Superiority of the Aryan race. But this is coming from a region which is ridden with poverty, hunger and disease. There is too much duality. India's economic rise has widened, you know, the inequality in the Indian space, you know. So one is that this is a fascist tendency that we have seen in the Soviet communism, Italian fascism, you know, Nazi Germany, Israeli, you know, genocide that is taking place right before our eyes. So perhaps, you know, sometime it seems to me that the story of the world history, at least in the last century, is a story of Frankenstein. And I think the responsibility for that goes to the imperial Western powers, that they have encouraged every time.
Or they have failed to civilize India. This is what you were saying earlier.
So a fascist tendency is created with their support, then it becomes a hell of a problem for themselves. So I just imagine sometime now that perhaps if we are sitting together 10 years down the lane, we might have a peculiar situation of the rise of Hindu nationalism being, you know, expressed, you know, globally as a threat, and Pakistan re-emerges third time in a row after Second World War as a frontline state against Hindu fundamentalism, you know.
No, I don't think that is going to happen, Dr. Saab, but nevertheless, what you were saying is quite enlightening. I just wanted to point out that your take is interesting, but every country has its you know, limited fringe that is primitive in one way or the other. Unfortunately, it is usually not allowed to take over the country. When it happens like in Afghanistan or in India, that actually makes a mockery of the country. Let me now very quickly go back to Faisal Saab. Faisal Saab, again, what is worrying me at this moment? I could understand that India and Israel, I'm glad that earlier there was a connection that was highlighted regarding Qatar. India and Israel are the biggest cheerleaders of war and terror the day 9/11 happened, right? After that, they have been the biggest beneficiaries also, because they actually absorbed and professed the clash of civilization thesis and kept on benefiting. But they are also the biggest liabilities. Whatever America does erroneously or by accident in other countries, or perhaps out of desperation like in Iraq, India and Israel want to do it deliberately and then end up blackmailing America. I thought that it was about basically fighting terrorism, but now it seems that they are not happy with freedom of expression, despite calling themselves democracies, and they are actually killing people to gag them.
Yeah, Farrukh, if we obviously, you know, first of all, Dr. Ishtiaq mentioned Frankenstein. I think now Frankenstein knows what are the limits he needs to cross to go towards that the monster shouldn't be as big that it can't be controlled. I think it wants to have a monster, but wants to have a monster that can be controlled in terms of obviously India. So
like they had this little man called Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. I mean, that was a
monster should be controlled, right?
Monster should be controlled, and India is a monster that they are trying to control now, and they will be successful in that. Coming towards,
how?
You know, how the way they are doing it right now. I mean, diplomatically, they will do it diplomatically.
Do you think that diplomacy alone actually affects India even a little bit?
Sure it will. Sure it will, because when India would be, you know, finding itself not, you know, gripping a very good diplomacy within the world, and we know that they have been getting an access to the lobbies. I mean, Washington-based lobbies, New York-based lobbies, they have been utilizing that in the West very professionally. Now, I think it would be quite difficult for them to go through that. Coming towards, you know, a sort of shake hand between Hindutva ideology and the Zionism, that regarding that, today I was watching one of the videos, I mean, widely shared on social mediums as well, and by the Israelis themselves, in which in front of the embassy of Israel in New Delhi, there were so many people and hardliner Hindus who were wanting to go to Israel to fight for them, to fight for them against the Muslims. I mean, this is what is taking place right now.
You realize that that desire is not a love of the Jewish community, because these people, these hardliners actually are so influenced by Nazi doctrine that they see Jews and Christians and Muslims as common enemy.
Exactly.
They want to go there because they get to kill people.
Exactly. And you know, at the same time, when I go through the processions of the Jewish communities in New York, in London, in the biggest capitals of the world, I mean, what they are standing with the people of Palestine. They are standing with Palestine at the same time.
Humanity, particularly.
Yeah, humanity. To me, it is a war that is in between good and evil.
Yeah, but let us not actually go to Palestine. Let us stick to what India is doing right now.
Yeah, I'm just coming towards India now.
There's a reason why I actually raised this point. Hang on. There's a reason I asked you this question, because you suffer Indian media quite often. And they are very good at shouting down Pakistani voices on their medley of television program. So why is it that freedom of expression triggers India so much that they would cross international boundaries, go to their own allies and their countries and kill people?
Talking about Indian media, it's just more of a Godi media, as everyone, I mean, it's widely known.
But I'm talking about collective pro-censorship psychology.
Yeah, to me, Farrukh, I think it is ultra-nationalism that is being followed within India, and in that context, of course, what they want to do is they just want to propagate whatever their ideologies are.
No, but Faisal, if for example, a referendum takes place in Canada, in UK, elsewhere, and they actually express their firm belief that Khalistan should be independent, that doesn't change anything. You have the real deal. You have controlled that, and it doesn't change anything on ground. Sikhs are dying to prove their loyalty to India within India. So why would this expression of freedom trigger Indian psychosis?
Because they do not want to have another Golden Temple kind of incident, because
through word of mouth?
No, not through word of mouth.
Who's weaponizing Sikhs? No one is.
No one is.
Sikhs don't have any weapons in India.
No one is, but that it's at the same time, it is a sort of a fault line, the major fault line for India. And of course, we know that there are 32 of them fault lines. And the balkanization of India has always been talked about. So India has that fear. India has that fear that there will be a time in which, of course, the Hindutva supremacy would be burst into pieces, and of course, people would not be...
that doesn't affect India's integrity, right? And this is my humble submission, and I've been failing to understand it. I have to actually move forward and take this very question to other guests as well. I don't know whether we have Ambassador Jauhar Saleem with us. Ambassador Saab, this question actually really worries me and fascinates me. India seems to be actually mounting these influence campaigns around the world. We saw one example in Disinfo Lab EU, and after that also we have been hearing all these voices, this anger, this offense, this outrage at anything that is said in any part of the world. Has India become the new censorship Gestapo of the world?
Well, the Western countries are aware of what they've been doing as well. I was ambassador to some Western countries, including Germany and Italy, when some of these stories broke out. There's a great deal of concern there, but it was not really totally off their radar. There were, like I said, because of the priorities, they were condoning certain actions or overlooking certain actions by the Indian regime. But I can tell you that they are very aware of the excesses of Modi regime in India, the excesses that this Hindutva government is carrying out in terms of minorities in India, particularly Muslims, but also Christians and Sikhs. So that is there. But in the broader chess game of international politics, some things are overlooked. It's nothing uncommon. During the Cold War is full of many such examples when even dictatorships in many parts of the world,
Pinochet and all.
yeah, exactly, Pinochet in Chile, but many other
Something other
dictatorships in Asia as well, they became staunch allies of the US. In fact, the human rights excesses there were totally ignored by the media for the most part, and totally by the US government or Western government as well. So this is nothing unusual or uncommon. Having said that, I think a time comes when um, regimes, they sort of, like, think they play a hand which gets them in trouble as well. And India seems to have done that. There's the recent actions in Canada, US, in some other places, in Qatar, for instance, mentioned. I don't think all these will be overlooked, as was the case in the past.
Right. Right, and that is important. Let me actually bring the question regarding India's attitude and accountability to Dr. Ishtiaq. Dr. Saab, as we speak, there was, an audit going on by FATF in India. And we have seen that only a few years ago, I think it was in 2020, that FinCEN data leak actually revealed that India has been complacent in sending money to redoubtable places, especially supporting terrorism as well. And that was to the tune of at least $1 billion. And that is not all. This is the age of cryptocurrency, so there must be other means to send money out as well. In the end, Pakistan also identified one of the banks in that, Punjab National Bank, as in its dossier that it is supporting Baloch separatists or subnational terrorists through Afghanistan, and also TTP or similar kind of organizations. Now, all of this is on record. Do you think that FATF will be able to hold India accountable at all?
Well, as you know that, first of all, let me just make the point that, it is about time, because still, if you talk about, this transnational terrorist or, intelligence activities of the Indian state, it is still the early stage. And I think it is about time that, the international community and countries in the neighborhood in particular come up with a strategy with some kind of proactive diplomacy to expose this emerging phenomena. Already, the expose is visible. The Western public and Western governments are realizing the danger of leaving India in this state of recklessness and rogue behavior. And I think Pakistan has already been taking, and making the case for Kashmiris and for other instances inside Pakistan of India's, state-sponsored terrorist activities and the terrorist financing that takes place. But we need to gear up, because this is the opportunity to engage with the concerned Western capitals and capitals in the Gulf and other parts of the world, Europe, to just sensitize them that there have been many instances, and there is a pattern of behavior, the conduct of the Hindu nationalist regime of India, and they have to raise this issue diplomatically and exercise pressure against the regime. And with regard to your question, I think this is a great opportunity. There are more than 30 countries which are full members of the Financial Action Task Force. As you know, that Pakistan was also in the grey list between 2018 and last year. So more than 4 years we were on the grey list, and we complied with the 40 recommendations and 13 outcomes, which is a gigantic task, and we were able, despite the fact that we had political instability, economic, near default situation, yet we were able to chalk out and enforce a credible, regime, both in terms of stopping terrorist financing and money laundering. Now the question is very serious regarding India. You have already mentioned, this info lab, this instances of, uranium smuggling. Back in the last 30 years, there have been many instances. Misfiring of a missile into Pakistani territory, you know, espionage in Qatar, terrorist assassination in Canada, about to take place assassination in the United States of America. October, another Sikh leader was mysteriously died, you know, and the family says he was poisoned. 2 assassinations of Sikh leaders in Lahore in the last 2 years. So these are practical, these are facts, these are not allegations or accusations. Why I say is FATF is, you know, FATF, the task FATF has is to see whether India has complied with the 40 recommendations and 13 outcomes in the last 1 decade or so, because this on-site inspection, which is a mutual inspection, which is currently taking place this month, it will conclude by the end of this month. It was delayed for several years because of COVID-19. Now it is taking place. The plenary session will take place in June 2024.
So we are going to keep looking at that. I'm told that we have to actually conclude the program. But Faisal, usually I'm given a couple of minutes in the end to conclude, and I don't want to actually come out as somebody who is so offensive, doesn't allow you to talk. If you want to have your say in half a minute, please go ahead.
Yeah, Farrukh, I really wanted to say that, of course, this is the time that Pakistan, at the same time, of course, has to make sure that the world knows whatever is going on within Kashmir as well, because abrogation of 370 and 35A, as it was earlier mentioned by Dr. Ishtiaq very rightly, that it is part of it as well. Because justice is not being provided to people of Kashmir, and I think it needs to be highlighted. And at the same time, of course, it is time for Pakistan to raise all of the issues.
And continuously.
Yeah,
so
continuously.
I'm told that we have to conclude the program here. Raja Faisal, thank you very much for being part of the program. Ambassador Jauhar, Saleem, always a great pleasure. Same goes for you, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmad, always a great pleasure and privilege to have you on the show. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. I'm not going to add too much to it, but just do one thing. Just visualize two words, India and censorship, in your mind, and draw a dead circle around them. Because there are going to be stories that will baffle you once whatever is going on in India is over. And mind you, we are the first recipients of such kind of seismic shocks, and that went on for past 10 years. So I have personal stories. I know so many stories about others as well. If someday something changes in India, we will tell you. There is an Urdu, verse, जो तार से निकली है तुम सबने सुनी है, जो सांस पे गुजरी है फकत इस दिल को पता है. So whatever melody came out of this chord is heard by all, but what happened to the instrument is just known to this heart. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.